Welcome to the Marysville School District Instructional Technology Training on Google Drive. My name is Melissa Dilling, and I'm an Instructional Technology TOSA here with the Marysville School District. Today, we're going to train to use Google Drive, folders, and sharing so that we can have increased classroom productivity and staff collaboration. Our success criteria include that we will know how to access Google Drive using the Google Apps icons, that you'll be able to create documents, spreadsheets, and presentations using Google Drive, that you can share documents with others, as well as move documents in folders to organize them in a desirable way. When you leave this training, you'll also be able to teach students to create a folder and share it with you, to teach students to create their own documents, spreadsheets, and presentations and place those in shared folders, as well as teach students how to share documents with each other to work collaboratively. So before we get started, it's important to think about our current organizational system. So in the space provided in the training, I would like you to answer the following question. How do you currently organize your classroom materials? Examples might include filing cabinet, baskets, cubbies, computer desktop, or other systems that you have put into place. And I'd also like you to reflect on how well those systems work for you. And when you're done, come on back here after you submit your answer, and we'll take a look at how Google Drive might be helpful for you. All right, so let's learn a little bit more about what Google Drive is and how it can be accessed in places other than your computer.
Google Workspace is a set of cloud-based apps that you can use to create documents, spreadsheets, presentations, and more. One of the apps in Google Workspace is Google Drive. Google Drive is a cloud-based file storage service that allows you to manage, organize, edit, and share files online. Instead of being stored on your computer, files that you save to your Google Drive are stored in the cloud. The cloud is a secure place on the internet where you can save important information and access it from any device with an internet connection, like a computer, smartphone, or tablet.
All right, and as the video states, Google Drive is accessible from anywhere. So those of you who may have said, I use a filing cabinet or I have my papers in the back of my room in a cubby of some kind, that's excellent. But if we start utilizing the power of Google Drive, and let's say you were at home or you had to take a sick day from your students, if all your files and folders are organized nicely in your Google Drive, not only can you share them with students to collaborate, but you can also share them with other teachers easily and seamlessly. So let's look a little bit more about what Google Drive can do for you. All right, I'd like you to keep your answer in mind from the question you previously answered about how you currently stay organized. I find that once we learn a little bit more about Google Drive and how much it has to offer, that sometimes those paper and pencil ideas about organization, we sometimes will set those aside and end up relying a little bit heavier on Google Drive. So let's start off with the organizational structure and how I can get to Google Drive. And this, of course, would be the same for your students. So it's great for you to know all the ways to get to Google Drive so you can help them access those quickly. So we have 3 different options to get to our Google Drive. The first is if you have bookmarks showing in your window here, you will have an apps button with 9 dots on it. So that's one way to get there. Now, before I click on that, I am going to show you how to get these bookmarks showing if for some reason you yourself don't have that. Settings wheel. All right, I'd like you to keep in mind the answer to the question you previously answered about how you stay organized in your current system with all of your documents and spreadsheets and assignments and curriculum. And let's consider that Google Drive might solve some of your organizational problems, or simply make it a little easier for you to find everything. So let's start off with the basics of Google Drive. There are many ways to get to my Google Drive system, and I'm going to walk through each of those, and then you should be able to also show these to your students because some of them are not as obvious as one would think. So in the top left corner, I see the word apps and it has 9 colored squares next to it. We call this the waffle. I call this one the colored waffle. If I were to click on this, I'm going to see some items that I have previously loaded from Google for me, things like Google Drive. But some of you may not have this bookmark bar showing, so I'm going to show you how to get that next. In the top right corner, I see an M. This means this is Melissa, so this is my profile showing. It looks like I have an update here, but I'm going to go ahead and click that little rounded rectangle. And I'm going to come down to the word bookmarks, and I use my bookmarks a lot. We're going to talk about those a little later in the training, but you're going to want to make sure that this right here says show bookmarks bar. Mine's already checked, so I don't have that ability to check it, but you may need to check it so that you can see your bookmarks showing. So that colored waffle, since my bookmarks are active, I'm going to go ahead and click it for you, and you notice that you get a bunch of options here from Google, and one of them is Google Drive. In fact, I have it twice. That's pretty fun. So I'm going to go back. So not only do I have the rainbow waffle, I also have the gray waffle. This shows when I'm on a Google page of most different Google pages will show it, not all web pages, but Google products will. And those of you that are rushing over to try this on your own, just watch me for now. In just a few minutes, I'm going to let you try all these different things, and then you're going to reflect on how that went. So this is my gray waffle. It's also my Google Apps. You'll notice I have many preloaded from the Marysville School District for active items. Some are Google products, some are links to other products. So if I go all the way down to the bottom, you notice I have some other things that we might be using at certain schools and not others. Now this gray waffle here, these are customizable. So here's my Google Drive that holds most of my things. Here's Google Classroom and Calendar, but I can pick these up and move them around. So if you'd like Google Drive to be near the top because you access it a lot, that's another way to do that as well. Finally, if I go to Google Drive a lot, it may show up down here in my shortcuts or most visited sites. So you may see that on yours. You may not if you haven't been there a lot or haven't been there before. So I'm going to go ahead and click back to apps. And then I'm going to go ahead and join the Google Drive. Okay, now Google Drive can be like a giant rainforest. You can get very lost in the forest if you're not careful to be organized. So we're going to take just a few minutes to talk about how we get organized. Now you'll notice at the top up here, I have some tabs. Some are large and some are small. In fact, you might even see this Google Drive icon right here, and it's on a small tab. The reason why it's small is it has been pinned. And when you pin a tab, every time you open Google, it will open these tabs. So it looks like I have my mail, a spreadsheet, my calendar, an organization system called Asana, Google Drive, a Google Doc, and here, this is a skills workshop. That's a website that I'd like to get to. So all of these have been pinned, and my suggestion to you is that you actually pin your Google Drive so that it always comes up on your screen. If you're on a MacBook, you just need to do a very gentle 2-finger tap. That's like right-clicking on a mouse. So I'm not clicking, I'm just 2-finger tapping on my trackpad, and I get a bunch of options. And this one that says pin, this is a great option. I use it all the time. Now you notice Google Drive has been pinned, and every time I open my Google Chrome, all of these tabs will appear. Now it looks like I pinned something here by accident, so I'm going to 2-finger tap, and notice I have the ability to unpin. It gets large, and now I can close it like a regular tab. The other option for Google Drive, if you don't want to pin it, is you could add a bookmark. So we'll talk a little bit more later about how we organize bookmarks, but if you'd like to take a moment and just click that star and say add bookmark, if you haven't done so already, then it will show up on your bookmarks bar here. And if you have too many like I do, it goes to the very bottom. So there's Google Drive, And now I could access it from my bookmarks bar. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and pop back over to our presentation. And I just showed you a bunch of techniques. We talked about pinning tabs. We also talked about bookmarking tabs. So I'd like you to try those two things. If you've never pinned something, that might be a new tool for you. But I'd like you to think about how might pinning tabs and using bookmarks be helpful for your current job function. And then once you reflect on that and submit your answer, come on back here and we're going to talk a little bit more about Google Drive. All right, so I like to think about Google Drive like a filing cabinet. So if you have filing cabinets, if you can even look around in your room, if you happen to be in your classroom, you might notice there's tons of different folders in there. There's also probably a lot of papers in there. Some of them belong to you. Some of them might have belonged to a partner teacher and they were nice enough to share it with you and maybe you made a copy of it. But your Google Drive has several different drives inside. So again, if we think about drives as filing cabinets, let me explain what those different ones are. So the first one that you'll probably use most often is something called My Drive. So My Drive holds all your personal files and documents. You have the lock and key to all of these files and documents, which means no one else can get to them unless you give them sharing permission and unless you share some sort of access or a link with someone. So My Drive is usually listed at the top when you first go into Google Drive on the left-hand side. Now, the second kind of drive you might see is called a shared drive. And a shared drive is a group of files that you are given access to with documents inside. So a shared drive might be for, let's say, your 7th grade language arts teachers. It could be for a department as a whole. So the technology department has shared drives, and lots of different people have access to those files. But somebody will originally give you permission, and once you have permission, then you can view anything that has been saved inside those shared drives. So again, it's like two different filing cabinets. Now below those two drives, you'll see something that says shared with me. So let's say a colleague of mine made an assessment for a math test and I really liked it, and they gave me access to it. I could go into shared with me and I could search for that teacher's name and I could find any document that they shared with me. So shared with me holds lots of files. Anytime someone gives you a link or makes you a collaborator of some kind and says, hey, will you share this with me? Let's work on it. Or I'd like you to view it, either one, then you are able to find it in your shared with me. Google Drive has many benefits to a traditional storage system and may help you find your files more easily in the future. Some things to consider is that when you save things to your computer desktop, you cannot access those from another computer. You cannot collaborate at the same time. And if you do want to share something with a colleague or another teacher or student, it requires uploading or emailing in order to share those documents and files. However, if you're using your Google Drive, you can access those from any computer, anywhere, including phones and tablets. You can collaborate at the same time, and you can share with, edit, comment, or view so that you have a lot of options for how people are interacting with your items that you're creating using your Google tools. Now, if you want to add to your My Drive, there's many options. And one thing I like to tell students is to look for the rainbow plus at the top of their My Drive button. And that will open up many of your features, including how to upload folders, files, as well as the different types of applications like Google Docs, Google Sheets, Google Slides, Google Forms, and more. So let's go take a quick peek at all those options that come up and how you might use those with students. All right, so here I am in my My Drive folder. As we mentioned, here's that rainbow plus button. That's so important for students to know how to access. And if we push the rainbow plus button, we get all of our options. Now, if you have folders and files that live on your computer and you'd like to get them into your Drive, these are the two buttons you would use right here in order to bring them up into Google Drive. So if it's just an individual file, you would choose File Upload and then go look for that file. So here's an example. I can see some files on my computer. Or if you have an entire folder of work, you could also grab that as well. Now, Google Docs is our just a document creation, much like Word. Google Sheets is a spreadsheet program, much like Excel. Google Slides is our slideshow program, similar to PowerPoint. And Google Forms can make us quizzes, tests, as well as surveys. Now, this More button doesn't get explored very often, but underneath the More button does live Google Drawings. This is a different kind of desktop publishing, pretty simple, but it does allow you to draw, paint, and create simple drawings that can be students can share or you can share with others. We do have a Maps program as well, and Google Sites. Google Sites is a website creation program. You can make teacher websites using Google Sites, and we'll have some updated classes with that as well. And then I'm going to skip down here to Jamboard. This is an online collaboration whiteboard where you can share a link to students. Again, we'll be having some additional trainings on this, but this is great for collaboration. You do have a More Apps button, so you notice I have a few more things listed. So you can go and look for other items that you might want to be using on a regular basis that saved to Google Drive, and you can search through here as well. So I see Audacity. Let's just grab this one. This is a recording software that allows you to record audio. So if you find something you like, you click on it and choose Install. And then you'll click on your Google account, hit Continue, and then it'll give you some information about that individual app that you just connected to your Google Drive. So I'll show you that now. If I were to reload, then I would see this appear and oh, here it is. It's already appeared for me. And now I can open it from here. Now, a lot of these apps that you would add are connected to your Google Drive. So when you do add something new, it will make different folders associated with that. So for example, you see a folder that says Pear Deck right here. I did not make this folder. Pear Deck, when it was connected, automatically created a folder, and then it used that to save items for me. So I wouldn't want to delete that because that's connected to Pear Deck. Another one that you see here is Screencastify. This is an extension. So up here, this is how I do some screen recording. My extensions are this puzzle piece right here. I'm just going to click on it. Some of them are preloaded for you by the district. So for example, Kami, you might see a Kami folder. And that's because when I create things using these little extensions up here, many times they will make a folder for me and then they will save here. So WeVideo is the video creation program I'm using today. WeVideo automatically saves copies for me. So that is one thing to consider about your Google Drive is that if you see folders listed that you did not create, before you delete them, you'll want to think about, is that a program that perhaps is linked to another area that I might need to think about and just maybe not delete some data that I need to get. So that's kind of what's under my Rainbow Plus button, the new button. I did just want to go down a little farther and show you a few of these. So we talked about our drives earlier in this presentation, and we did talk about shared with me, but I do love the recent button. So if I'm working on something and maybe I can't remember the name of it or who it belongs to, recent shows me all of my folders and files that I've worked on. Notice these say November. This is close to when I'm making this video, so that then I can just see everything I've opened or made a modification to. Makes it much easier to get back to it. Starred is another great place if you have things that you're working on often in your Google Drive. So for example, here's, let's go ahead and go back just a minute. All right, so let's say I was working on this right here, this Google Drive. That's our presentation today. If I right click on any folder or any file and I come on down, I get lots of options. We're going to go into those next, but I'll happily show them to you now because it's relevant. About halfway down, a little past halfway, you have something that says add to starred, and starred is listed right here. So let's say I'm going to access that a lot, many times. A little blue star will appear. And then when I click on my starred, now you notice this item appears here. It's not a copy of it. It's actually a shortcut to that original place. But then I can search for just those most important items. Now, of course, your trash is here. Notice it says items in the trash are deleted forever after 30 days. Otherwise, this would be a huge file. So just important to kind of check on that. If you think you threw something away by accident, you can right click on it and choose restore, and that will put it back in the folder it was at. Delete forever, of course, means we'll never see it again. So just be careful in choosing that. It does show me how much storage I have used. It's also showing me things that are taking up the most storage, so it's listed in order. So you should never run out of storage with the school district, but if for some reason you wanted to check what are the files, folders, and items that are taking up a lot of storage, you could look at that there. And then it also reminds you everything you have. So it's just another way to see something. Now, also up here in your Google Drive, you can search for items. And when you search for something, again, you can search just by a keyword. Like I'm going to type Google Drive just because, again, that's our presentation. And notice it's pulling up anything that has Google Drive listed for it. So I do use the search engine quite a lot. Over on the right-hand side here, I do have this grid view. So I can change how I want things listed, whether they kind of look more like a list, or I get files and folders here that then I get little thumbnails that show up, and that can be really nice if you're looking for something that you remember what it looks like, but you're not sure of the name. So don't forget you have that button also. If I click view details here and I select on any kind of folder or file, let's go down here to the bottom. Actually, these are just previews. So if I click on a file, it tells who has access. I can add a description. It just is a kind of a preview. It also gives me most recent activity. So if you just want to look back and see if a student has access to a folder, that's kind of a great way to look at it as well. Now, over here on the right-hand side in your Google Drive, there's some additional items listed. So this right here is, you can pull up your Google Calendar right from your Google Drive. So if you did need to kind of see what's going on for today, the day, the schedule, or select a specific calendar, you could do that here. It also allows you to open it in a new tab if you were wanting to just go right to your calendar. Google Keep, we will have some additional trainings on Google Keep, but this is a way for you to make notes to yourself. And where if I had any Google Keep notes, I could pull them up. So maybe a to-do list or some items that I just have on my brain that I don't want to forget. But that is, and here's how I take a note. So if I press on it, I could make myself a little note to myself, not forget to do something. Another item here is our tasks. So very similar to Google Keep, only I'm making a list of tasks in a certain order, and I'm giving them due dates. So it's a way to kind of keep yourself on track. You might want to teach these two items to your students. So when they access their Google Drive, they always can see maybe a note to themselves or their task list for the week. I've even seen teachers do this instead of writing in your planner. So this can be kind of like an online planner to add tasks for students. Google Classroom, of course, keeps track of those things in their calendar as well as Canvas, but Google will do it. It's kind of a shortened form for Google as well. So that's kind of just a quick tour of Google Drive itself. We're now going to take a closer look at individual files and see what we can do with those. So here's our training for today. I'm going to show you that search feature one more time. So I'm going to search for this Google Drive training. And here it is. All right. Now, when we go to save something to our Google Drive, whether that be a Google Docs, a Google Sheets,
a Google slideshow like this one is. We do have a couple options that we see in Google Drive that are also listed in the file sharing system. So let's take a look here. So I could go down and make a copy of this. So if I were to copy the entire presentation, it would call it copy of Google Drive. And then it also tells me the folder that it's going to be in. If I wanted to choose a different folder for it to save in, the best time to do it is right here when you're saving, so it shows up in the correct place in your Google Drive. So I can hit the back arrow and be searching through my files and drives. So let's just save it maybe to my drive. And I can even create a new folder for my Google Drive right when I'm saving. So I could say new folder, and I'm just going to call this one test. And if I hit OK, now it's going to go right to that folder that I just created in my Google Drive. So let's go see if it's there. I'm going to refresh the page. All right, so here's that test folder. And then here's Google Drive training. All right, now you notice me navigating. Let me do that one more time for you. Notice me navigating here through these navigation tools as well instead of having to use the back button. That's great if you're several files deep into that. So I'm going to pause just for a moment, and I'm going to ask you just to go ahead and play with your Google Drive a little bit. See if you can save into a folder. So open some sort of document, maybe practice searching or starring items and seeing if that you can find them. Go ahead and explore your recent items as well. You can hit the pause button and come on back here when you're done, and then we're going to continue looking at what folders can do for you. Okay, so we're going to look at these folders right now. So I'm going to use this test folder as an example, and I'm going to right click on that. So let's clean up our folders just a little bit. And if I click on the folder icon, we did talk about starring. Starring shows up for folders as well as for any kind of file that we have in Google Drive, regardless of it. But we do have some other options, and I'm going to go through 4 of them, and then I'm going to have you pause and reflect and maybe go and try some of those for yourself. So we do have our share icon here. Sharing this folder is much like sharing permissions with other files that we have. If you've never shared something before, you can just type in their name of the person you'd like to share with. You can also do a message to them as well, and you can choose if they're an editor, a viewer, or a commenter. Don't choose editor unless you want them to actually do things to the files. Another thing we usually use sharing for is when we're sharing with large groups of people, so for training or students, and that's when we're down here. So the most important thing is to see if it says restricted. And if it's restricted, only people, so individual people's names, can open these files. When I'm doing something for students, I will choose Marysville School District, and then it says anyone in the group with this link can view. If you want them to see it, you would choose viewer. And if you want them to be able to do things with it, you would choose editor. So if you just want students looking at it, choose viewer. If you want them to type on it. Occasionally I will do anyone with the link if I'm sharing something for parents. So parents wouldn't have a Marysville Google account. And so if I'm sharing something that they may need to see, make sure it says anyone with the link, and you probably want it set to viewer if you're sharing with parents. But that's how I share an entire folder. This same is true on a document or anything that's in Google Drive. I would just click share and I would get the same options. You notice now it has a little person if I'm in this view. So remember, I could change the view up here. This little person means this has been shared. This blank folder means no one can access it but me. So that's kind of a quick, you can see what's been shared. So those are the share settings. Again, in just a few minutes, I'm going to have you go try those. If I need the link to that share setting, I can say get link. Here is the link to this folder. I could then copy this link and paste it into an email or Google Drive or into Clever or something like that so people could get to it. Now, if I choose show folder location, it's just showing me where it is. So if I was somewhere not where this actually lived, it would take me to the place that showed up. But I happen to be where it's located, so it didn't take me anywhere. Now, if I get into the test folder very often, then I would go ahead and say add shortcut to drive. If I add a shortcut to my drive, let me show you over here. Here's that shortcut. It lives right here. Now for folders that you own, this is less important, but if there was folders that maybe were in my shared with me, so for example here, and there was something that I wanted to be able to get to easily because I was using it often, if I right click on it and say add shortcut to drive, maybe to this Dia de Muertos, now this Dia de Muertos, that folder showed up here. So that lived somewhere else, and now you see that little arrow. That means it's a shortcut. It doesn't live here normally, but it is now available to me in a much easier way. You can also delete those, remove those shortcuts. So that one has a little arrow. I know it's a shortcut, and I'm going to go ahead and remove it. And I'll move it to the trash because that was just the shortcut. Notice the original folder is still here. Okay. And our final button we're going to play with today before I have you go and actually do some of this is this Move To button. So Move To allows me to choose a new location. So this currently lives in my drive. If I wanted my test to live inside, let's say, Brainstorm, I could open that folder using the arrows and say Move Here and move. It disappears from my main screen. And if I go find it in Brainstorm, now there's a folder inside there. So let's take a few moments and go ahead and clean up those items. So I'd love for you to play with those first 5 buttons. So share, get link, show folder location, add shortcut, and move. When you're done, I'm going to ask that you come back and reflect. How did it go? How did it go moving items, creating shortcuts, getting links and sharing, and maybe just explore this show folder location. All right, we're going to go back and look at some more of our folder options, and then we're going to have some additional time to use these as well. So we talked about the first 5 items here, and hopefully you just had a chance to play with them, but we're now going to move down to some of our other important items, such as starring, renaming, changing colors of folders, and then also how to download and remove those folders. So let's pop back over to Google Drive and take a quick look at a folder. So I was in Brainstorm Images and I had this test folder. So I'm going to right click on it and we're going to move on down here. All right. So if I ever name something that I don't like, it's very simple to rename it. This is true for a document as well. I simply left click or right click or 2-finger tap on my trackpad. So remember, tap real gently so you're not actually clicking, you're just tapping. And that pulls up my menu and then I could rename whatever I wanted here. I'll show you as well for an item that I've created. Again, that rename button is still there, even if it's not a folder. The next thing that is great for organization is changing the color of folders. So you notice here I just have this gray color. I'm going to navigate back to my main drive and notice everything here is gray. That's not always easy for my eyes to quickly pick it up. So if something is very important or maybe for a certain class, I could right click on any folder, change the color of that folder. And now it's just a little easier for my eyes to pick that up. So let's say if I use Kami and Pear Deck, I go into those folders a lot, maybe for 3rd or 4th period, something like that. If I'm a secondary teacher, I could color code those. And maybe I decide that yellow is going to be all my video folders. So it's real easy to change the color. So that's something I'll have you try in just a moment. The next item here, I've noticed some of the folders come up with this search button. So if I just wanted to search for an item within a folder, I wouldn't need to use this overall search button. I could use this one, and it allows me to find just the folders and files that are inside here. Okay, and then if I come on down here to download, if I wanted to take all of this off of my Google Drive, so maybe I want to put it on a thumb drive, or I have a reason that I need to save it all, maybe I'm changing positions and I want to get everything out of my Marysville drive, download is how I would get it out of the cloud, so out of that online storage and onto the actual computer itself. It's real simple. You just hit download. If it's a file, it's going to zip it up, and it's going to make something called a zip file, usually because it's just saves time. And then when I go to open it, it'll ask me if I want to unzip that file. So notice I get a little file with a zipper. That means it's kind of squishing it all together. If it's an individual file, so let's say this, this Jamboard picture here, I just hit download. Sometimes it'll convert it to a different type of file. This was an image. It decided it wanted to convert it for me. And finally, if I wanted to remove something entirely, I would hit that remove button, and then it would be in my trash for 30 days. So before I have you go play with those different options, let's talk about just a couple more items of note. So when we do add a folder, that's fine. We use that from the Google Drive button. But when you're creating work, I would always go and open the folder first so that the folder and the items are connected together. So let's say I create a new folder for first period. I would want to create that folder first. So I'd want to say File, New Folder. And let's say I want to say something that says first period. It shows up right here, and then let's say I want to make a document or a slideshow for first period. Before I choose an item to create, I would actually open this folder. And the reason I would do that is then anything I make is already inside the folder, and I don't have to move it later. And I've done a lot of things wrong and had to move them, and there are many ways to move it. Just that's a little hot tip, that if you create the folder first, then create the document. The document itself, I'll show you. And Google is saving every 3 seconds automatically, so that's how I know I can see it. There's that test folder, there's that first period folder, and the test document. Now it lives inside. It's not just kind of floating out here and not belonging to anything. So that's just a tip. Another thought is that you will see folders in Google Drive. We talked about this earlier. For example, Kami, Screencastify, Pear Deck, but there are more that when you save something or create it, it automatically makes a folder for you. So again, just be careful about deleting folders that have names of programs. It's probably the program saving directly to your Google Drive for ease, so you can get to those items. Google Classroom will also create a folder. So if you have a folder that says Google Classroom, it doesn't actually say Google Classroom, it just says Classroom. This is all the work that your students do and all the copies that have ever been made of something. So don't delete it and don't move it. You also want to remind your students not to delete it and not to move it, because if they do, we can no longer get to any of the items that they have created. So there are 3 ways to move an item, as I mentioned. We can right-click on the folder or file. We can right-click on the file path, and then we can also click on an icon within Google Drive. So let me show you those in action. So as I mentioned before, we can just right-click on a folder or a file and use the Move to, and we get this option of where do I want to put it, and then you would just navigate to find it. Okay, so that's item number 1. Item number 2 is when I'm inside maybe a folder, I have this file path. I can also right click on the path itself And then I have a move to button. So if I wanted to move first period, I right clicked on the file path and I get similar options here. Okay. And then if I'm inside any Google product, so Google Slides, Google Docs, Google Sheets, Google Sites, I do have this folder icon right here with an arrow. That's the same option as what we had before. And when I click on it, it's actually asking me where I want to move it to. And again, if I'm inside something, I often will get this new folder. If I need a new folder, I can create it on the fly. So that was 3 ways to move a folder. So what I'd like you to do is pause and reflect. Try those techniques that we were shown to add stars to folders, to rename folders, to change colors of folders. You could try downloading and then maybe even take some time right now to remove folders and files that you don't need. This is a great time to clean up your Google Drive. And then if you'd like to try to move a folder or an item using those 3 options that you were just shown, that would be great as well. So take this time to go ahead and clean up and then explain how the process went for you and if you have any additional questions. All right, now that your Google Drive is all cleaned up, let's talk just a little bit more about sharing, and then we're almost wrapping up our Google Drive. So one thing to think about is that you can share a folder link with students that they can then use their Gmail, Clever, Google Classroom to open. So we did talk about share settings, but that everything you put in a shared folder will automatically be shared with students. You don't have to continue to share a link over and over again. So that can be really great. And a lot of times people will use this for research so that, and they set the folder to view permissions so that students can't make any changes, but they can see something. Another great idea for a shared class folder is maybe a subfolder that you can add work from home, and then maybe you can just share a link with a sub so they can access copies of items. So let me quickly show you what I mean by that. Let's pop back over to our Google Drive. So let's say, for example, this first period was actually a subfolder, and I had items in here that I wanted to be able to share with a sub. And once I found out who the sub was, I could email them that link. So if I go into a subfolder and then I choose the share link here, I can add just specific people. So again, if I have a pre-assigned sub, I could put in their email address, even if it's not a Marysville account, and they would have access to this. The part about sharing, again, we want to be careful with is this link right now is usually restricted to only people with the link can access. So if it was a folder, maybe a research folder you wanted to share with students, you'd want to make sure to choose Marysville School District and make sure that it's set to viewer, and then they could see everything in the folder. They'd also get a copy of that folder in shared with me. So I don't have any folders in here. Oh, here's one right here. Here's a folder. This is what would show up for students. So name it something that they could find it. And then if they were to go into the folder, it would have maybe all of their resources for them that they could access. This is similar to sharing things in Google Classroom, but if you're not a Google Classroom user, this is another way to do it. One other thing to think about is that students, if you're using something like Kami or you're having them make videos in Screencastify, here's the Kami assignments. Anytime you open Kami, it creates an assignment folder. So here's just something that I worked on in Kami as a student, as a learner, and it lives in here. So anytime I opened it, it would be here. So students can be taught to share their folder with you. So if they have like a Kami assignment folder, they could go in and say share and type your name as the teacher here. Then you would get a folder from all of your students that said Kami assignments, and you could go in and look without them having to turn it in. It's a way to bypass Google Classroom. So naming becomes very important if you are going to have students share folders with you. So let's go back to that Kami assignments folder. So I would I suggest that if students, well, let's say they made a bunch of logos and we're going to share them with you to access them. I would, when they rename it, I would have them leave the beginning part of the folder name and then maybe put their last name. If you are not in an elementary school and you're in a secondary level, you might want to have them start with like the period number, the last name, and the title of the class. You may want to play around with your naming system, but that way, when you have a bunch of folders shared with you, you can see maybe what class they go with and what the student's name is. Otherwise, those folders will just all have the exact same name. So just make sure that maybe like if they are sharing Kami assignments, they just put their last name or something of the sort so you can find them. Another thing to think about here is that when students are collaborating, just like we shared those folders, you may want to go over these share settings with them and show them this link here and then remind them that how they share things matters. Otherwise, students get a lot of requests for access, as would you. So just using some of those items we talked about before, choosing very carefully, do you want view access or edit access, is to do a little tutorial with students. There is kind of an interesting tool that many people don't know about Google. It has some great share settings available if you would like to do it right from a document or an item itself. So you can force Google products, any Google product, to create a copy, allow view access, or allow edit access through using the URL that you're given. So when we have any kind of item here, so like a Google Doc, because this lives in the cloud, so it's internet based, it has a URL. So this right here is the direct path to get this item to view on your screen in your Chrome browser. And you might notice at the end here, it has the word edit, which means I can edit this item. Now, when you're working with any kind of item here, you can actually erase what's there after that very last backslash. Sometimes there's letters and numbers, and you can type other things like view or copy, and it will force Google when it opens to do whatever action you put here. It's kind of a secret inside trick. So we're going to watch a video about how this works in action. And when you see this video, I just want to remind you that this trick they're going to show you, there's a backslash in the URL address and you erase everything past it. Notice this one has letters and numbers, and then you'll be typing these words, copy, view, or edit. So let's take a look at it in action. It's a little easier to see. Here's a great example we found from another school where they did a great job.
Inundated with sharing requests after posting a view-only file to a website like this one? Doesn't matter that it says view-only access, and even though you may post directions to please make a copy of the document, many users will inevitably use the request edit access option, which then clutters up your inbox with sharing requests. But there's a great hack that forces users to make their own copy. First, share your document as view-only, just like always. Copy the link. Before you post this link on your website or share it via email, make a slight adjustment. Find the /edit at the end of the link, erase the word edit and anything that follows it, and then simply type the word copy after the slash. Now, when anyone clicks on the link, they are prompted to make their own copy, which is editable by them and will live in their Google Drive. This works for all native Google tools like Sheets, Slides, and Drawings. Just change that /edit to /copy. This makes it so much easier to share items that you want others to have their own copy of for editing and keeps those annoying sharing requests out of your inbox.
All right, so I would like us to try it for ourselves. I'd like you to go open a Google Doc from your Google Drive in the browser. I would like you to try deleting everything past the backslash and adding the word copy, and then copy and paste that into a new tab. Did it work? When and where might you use this trick? So before I have you do it, I'm going to show you one more time. So up at the top here, she was creating a link inside a document, but you can do it right here from the URL. So you're going to go and try to erase anything past edit. And you're going to copy this whole thing, either Command C or right click and say copy, and then put it in a new tab and hit enter and see if you can get this to come on up. All right, so one last thing about Google Drive, and then we're going to look at some resources, and then we'll just fill out our evaluations for this course. We did mention that sometimes we have a bunch of files on our desktop or on our computer. That includes folders, screenshots, anything that shows up. Now, if you would like to get those into your Google Drive easily, we did see that there's a file upload button in Google Drive. However, if you're on your Mac device, under your locations, you most likely have this Google Drive section. This Google Drive section is automatically syncing to your My Drive folder. So let's say you have some items on your desktop. So if I had some folders here or files, I can actually pick those files up and drag them into this location that says Google Drive, and they will automatically show up in my Drive folder. So that's just a kind of a time-saving tip. You can, of course, do a file upload. Now, if you notice you don't have Google Drive as one of your locations, it just means they're not syncing, and you can go ahead and reach out to the help desk and we can take care of that for you and get that reconnected. These links will be in the final slide where you'll fill out your evaluation. But if you'd like to learn more about Google Workspace and the Google Workspace products that they have, there's two really great places. The first is this Google Workspace Learning Center. So I'll click on that just to show you what that takes you to. And that takes you to where you can go and look at guides for a bunch of different things, kind of like a welcome to your overall products, but there's guides for new users. You can learn by different products, there's tips in here as well. So this is kind of their help center, and you can describe the issue that you are having. You can also go to this place called Apply Digital Skills. This is something that can be used with teachers or students. I've done a lot of learning as a teacher myself, but I've also assigned some of these lessons to students to get them more familiar with their Google Drive, their Google Docs, their Google Sheets. Now, if you want to start using these items, you would probably want to sign in just because it saves your progress, although you wouldn't have to. And then you notice here that I can kind of tell them what kind of learner I am. But I can also just click Start Learning. And then I'm going to go ahead and say Start Now. And it'll ask me again automatically to tell them about me. So it's not going to let me get past that without telling them who I am and what my role. It will ask your age. You do not have to put anything for name if you don't want to. And then kind of where you are in your city, that sort of item. Once you get past these I'm just going to do this really quickly. Once you get past these quick questions, if your students are doing this, of course, when you say you're a student, you get a few less options. So you don't need to, they won't need to answer quite as many questions. You can connect the lessons that are in here to Google Classroom. So if we browse their lessons, they do have them listed by age, but more importantly, they have them listed by digital tool. So if you want students to learn more about their Google Drive, there are many lessons in here. Some are obviously longer than others. Most are about a class period. And when you click into a lesson, so let's say use files, down below, it tells you everything that they're going to show you how to make. These have videos, and then there are little interactive quizzes, and then there's also some kind of extensions that you can do with students if you'd like them to go above and beyond. I'm just going to hit start, and these videos here are produced by Google themselves. Any links you need are here as well. They have usually a video overview. Students can choose the playback speed, and then I can move through these lessons as I see fit, and it's always going to be someone from Google telling me about how to do something. The nice thing about these lessons is, let me move one ahead so we can see, is they have nice demonstrations about exactly what's happening. And I do have the option to download these videos. So if you'd like to create your own collection of lessons outside of Google Applied Digital Skills, I can turn captions on, set playback speed, but I can also just download them, and then I have a video file. This is probably my favorite place to learn about Google. They're very user friendly. They've been used with students, upper middle school, or upper elementary, middle school, and even high school can find this very useful. So if there's just something of interest to you here as well, you can also browse by topic. So if you're looking for something specifically related to English or language arts, there's some like adventure stories, photo journals, but maybe you're looking for something that's more of an art project. Look how many products there are. So I'd really highly recommend Applied Digital Skills for things you can assign to students or do with students as a class. Very well produced and has everything that you need. So I did just want to thank you for joining us. In order to receive credit for this course, you'll just need to complete the attendance form, the course evaluation, and then you'll notice those links will also be in the form that you fill out here to the right of the video. So thanks again for joining us, and we hope to see you again soon. Have a great day.